That being said, giving the play to the blue-white-red Delver deck, I think that just about evens it up and might even push it a little in Brian's favor here.
Yeah. So we're going to see, can Brian capitalize on that play? Once again, we do have the story. We have our local player versus an established pro here. Is he going to be able to take him down? He's on the play. He is the 1 seed. In 3 games, he has marched his way through the top 8 and top 4, each time getting game 3 to advance to the finals, whereas Jacob has yet to drop a game once he's made it to the top 8.
Fancy.
Yeah, actually having 2 matchups, which are probably, of the decks in the top 8, were his 2 worst matchups. Really similar to Jesse Hampton yesterday.
Yep.
He played literally his 2 worst top 8 matchups and won both of them.
Turns out that pros are pretty good at Magic.
Yeah, we play a fair amount.
Yeah.
We will see though. It looks like Brian is on 6 cards here.
All right, 6 on the play, so that's a thing, you know, down 2, but it is going to be about the tempo for the early game.
So Brian's going to lead off with a Ponder. It doesn't look like he has any threats in his hand. He sees 3 lands and immediately shuffles it, despite the fact that one of them was a fetch land.
Yeah, not interested in that whatsoever.
Yeah, I think the problem is that if he keeps the fetch land, he's going to have to draw a second land.
He's going to have to draw 2 of them.
Yeah, so he'd have to really be in the market for lands to want to keep that.
You know, being land heavy against Rug Delver is not the worst thing, but not that land heavy.
So the Ponder turns into, well, unfortunately for him, a land. The good news is that the land is a wasteland, so it's more than just a land.
Yeah, it has some utility. Jacob's first turn. Let's see if he can get a Delver down. That would be his ideal turn 1.
Maybe he's going to go ahead and fetch for Tropical Island, which suggests either a Delver or a Ponder here, and it's going to be a Ponder.
And Jacob Wilson's Ponder, gonna see at least 1 land, look like a couple spells. His hand is pretty threat heavy if you look at it. Couple of Ponders and Tarmogoyfs, is that?
Yeah, I'm not positive. We know he has at least a pair of Ponders in his hand.
Yeah.
So Jacob also choosing to shuffle here. My guess is that he's a little light on lands, especially in a matchup like a Delver Mirror. You really, as long as you have a threat, you can't have too many lands in the early game.
Yeah.
Because you know there's going to be stifling and wastelanding happening.
Absolutely. Not to mention dazing and piercing.
Right, and just exactly that happens. Brian on his turn plays Wasteland. He wastelands Jacob. Has no play, but he has bought himself time to draw into a threat.
All right, and draws for the turn. Lightning Bolt, not an immediate threat, but does play a second land.
Yeah, so
pretty controlling hand.
Yeah, he has a Lightning Bolt. He also has a Stifle for Jacob's fetch land, so he can buy a lot of time. Ideally, he would be buying this time when he had a Delver in play.
Right.
He doesn't have a threat right now.
Although he's also not under any pressure. Both players threatless at the moment, and both with fairly controlling hands. So this might actually be a bit of a longer game than we had first expected.
Yeah, the pressure he is under here is that Jacob had a wasteland. So Jacob saw Brian miss the land drop and attempted to wasteland.
Yep.
And so tried to wasteland Brian's Tundra. Brian's going to try to stifle the wasteland, and now is Jacob going to respond?
Yes, he cracked a fetch. Brian thought about stifling that fetch as well, but he's going to let that one go.
Well, there's the worry that if he tries to stifle that fetch, that Jacob will stifle his other fetch in response, and then Brian could be left with no lands. And yeah, they're showing the stack here. There's a stifle on that wasteland trigger.
Yep, Jacob Wilson's fetch resolved. The stifle still on the stack. Looks like he's going to start by using his other fetch land. It's important that, you know, you're maneuvering around stifles and dazes at the same time, and then, like, Pierce also just thrown into the mix, not to mention Force of Will.
Yeah, we do know that actually Brian has a hand that's pretty good. He has a fairly controlling hand here, right?
Yeah, definitely a Force of Will and a couple other blue cards as well as a Lightning Bolt.
All right, so we'll see what the response is here. You know, Jacob took this opportunity to fetch. It may just be that he wanted to fetch while Brian's Stifle mana was down.
Yeah.
We'll see if he actually makes a play here, as opposed to just cashing in his lands.
All right, going to use his other Stifle, and now this is really good by Brian, because if Jacob Wilson went to stifle Brian's fetch, then Brian could daze it, not only countering the Stifle, but also returning the Tundra that the Wasteland is targeting, so that Jacob couldn't, counter the Stifle and end up killing the Tundra.
So we have a pretty large stack happening right now. Both the fetch lands are on the stack too. It looks like while that fetch land is gone, Jacob is now he got the tropical island. He's going to daze
Float
that
a mana.
stifle. This is
Yep.
actually a really heads up play. I think Jacob's going to get all of Brian. He's going to get all of Brian's lands as a result here. So he waited to bait Brian into tapping that, searching for that fetch land. And the first thing he's going to do is daze the stifle that's on the wasteland. Because Brian fetched there, Brian's not going to be able to pay for this daze. Unless, of course, he has a daze of his own, which I believe he does.
He's got a bunch of blue cards. Looks like a daze, a force, a pierce, and a stifle.
So right now, to review, we have that wasteland has been sacrificed. It's targeting the tundra. Brian stifled the wasteland. We also have both players trying to fetch. Jacob fetched first, Brian fetched second, so Brian will be getting his land into play first. But before those lands come into play...
Jacob Wilson floated a mana and dazed the stifle.
Right, so the stifle's now under attack. Jacob has 1 mana floating, so what that means is that Brian can't actually daze back here because Jacob has the mana to pay for it.
He's going to have to force if he wants to fight. And it looks like that's what he's considering doing. Oh.
And he's going to daze back.
He's going to daze back. This isn't going to counter, but it doesn't matter because now the tundra is in his hand.
Yeah, so that actually is a defense from the wasteland as well.
Correct.
So Jacob will probably not pay for the daze.
Wise.
Because there's no reason to pay for it. Countering the stifle has already been countered because its target is gone. So Jacob will use that mana, however, to stifle the fetch on the Scalding Tarn.
Which Brian is forced to force. Not able to spell pierce, no mana. Not able to daze, no islands, or another daze. And now he's pitching a stifle. So that force of will is on the stack, targeting the stifle. And I think Jacob Wilson's going to fight back here.
Yeah, so Brian is right now in line to keep all his lands. And I don't think Jacob's very happy about letting that happen.
No, I imagine that this is a point of contention for Jacob. This one land is fairly important.
So he's going to stifle. He's going to force of will, pitching ponder. This is a seven deep stack. Okay, so force of will counters force of will. Stifle counters the fetch land. Jacob's going to go get to fetch for his own fetch land.
The stifle on the wasteland technically resolves, but doesn't matter.
Yep, and wasteland doesn't resolve, but its target was gone anyway.
Exactly, and I believe this was all in Brian's upkeep, if I was keeping track of all that correctly. Yep,
yeah,
and
so
sure
Jacob
enough,
does get his 1 volcanic island. Remember, both players have a land in their hand thanks to the dazes that were cast there.
Brian actually holding his tundra, gonna wait until Jacob deploys a threat so that he can, do something with his mana.
Yeah, and speaking of threat, Jacob finally now puts something on the board. He has a Tarmogoyf.
Well, we're looking at a Tarmogoyf and 2 lands versus no permanence at the point.
Yep.
At this point.
Brian's hand is Tundra, Bolt.
Yep.
To tell you a little bit about how this game's going for him, yeah, he can't really cast anything right now, and Jacob's just going to make another Tarmogoyf. Looks like he's going to be able to capitalize here on the mana woes of Brian.
Yeah, Jacob sculpted this game really beautifully. That whole stack he was manipulating, getting to exactly this point, super far ahead. He's brainstorming, filtering. His hand is fantastic, and he has an overwhelming board presence.
Yeah, so Jacob, this is his last Star City Games Open win was a Legacy Open win with Rogue Delver as well. I think what really skilled, you always see, when you see a really skilled Rogue Delver player, they're able to take a very slight advantage and just snowball it into a heavy advantage. And that's what it was. Brian was on a 6-card mulligan. Jacob was on the draw, so he just was able to take that +2 cards and just turn it into a decisive victory.
Absolutely bury Brian with a very slight advantage.
Yeah, Brian missed 1 land drop, and then Jacob turned that 1 land drop into all his permanents.
Yep, and that was enough.
All right, so we see Brian attempting to wasteland on the volcanic island. Jacob is going to lightning bolt in response, and that's going to be it. Jacob takes the first game in the match.
Very impressive.
All right, so Jacob Wilson, 1 game from doing a clean sweep through the top 8. But
that was on the draw, also.
That was on the draw. But Brian, no stranger to being down a game. Remember, he won all his matches in 3.
Yep.
Is he going to be able to do it again? Is he going to be able to have the comeback here?
That is the question, and we are going to cut back to the booth for the big one.
Yeah, this is the
final
final trivia question of the
How many
night.
months?
This is for, remember, it doubles each time, so
How
we
many-
gave out 6 last time.
Okay.
Yep.
What's it now?
It's going to be 12.
I need 2 fingers.
All right, all right.
All right.
10, 11, 12.
All right. 12 months of premium. So what are the rules? We gotta tweet it
Yep.
to with the hashtag SCG Premium,
Yes.
and it's about accuracy, not speed. You know, you don't have to break your fingers, break your keyboard typing it too fast, and we'll pick a correct answer at random. What is the question?
All right. So we are going to ask a question about, right now, currently our pro player Jacob Wilson, who's in the finals, threatening to win again. This is not his first finals appearance with Rug Delver. He was successful winning a Legacy Open with Rug Delver. Where did that Open occur?
And you can spell it, you know, however you want.
Yeah, you could.
You can spell it how it's pronounced by the
phonetically-
locals. You can spell
It's
it.
okay. Anything that's remotely close. If you name a city in the same state, we'll probably just give it to you. So make sure you have that answer with the hashtag SCG Premium. And at the end of the finals, we will select one person to win 12 free months of Star City Premium.
Fingers again.
2 more.
Thank
2
you.
more.
All right.
All right. So back into our match. Game 2 is going to be a lot like the first. Brian's going to be on the play again,
Yep.
which puts him at an advantage. So the path to winning is going to start with the Game 2. This is the easy one. If he
Yeah.
wins it, he's going to get to go to the more difficult one.
Yep. One of the big tempo cards for Delver-esque mirrors, or Delver mirrors, I should say, from Jacob Wilson's deck is the Submerge, which does not actually work against Brian's deck. No forests here. Meanwhile, on the other side, Brian gets to up to the 3rd Swords to Plowshares and 1 Submerge to
Yeah.
complement the 2 main deck Swords to Plowshares and Lightning Bolts. So a lot more very efficient, cheap removal, as well as, you know, a couple of Red Elemental Blasts, Pyroblasts.
Remember, Pyroblast can target a green spell. Red Elemental Blast can't target a green spell.
Exactly. Well, that's another way that
We're not sure if that makes it worse or better. It depends on the situation.
Yeah.
And it, frankly, almost never comes
it's
up.
the cornerest of cases, but I have had it come up with a topic we've discussed before, the old Bridge from Below. In
You
no
targeted
rug,
a Phantasm.
Yep.
No?
In no rug, a phantasmal image on a green
Creature.
Creature.
You can target it with Pyroblast. You can't target it with Red Blast.
Exactly. I pyroblasted it.
All right. So that there is a difference. Okay. As next year, as we saw this matchup play out between Joshua Ravitz and Jacob Wilson in the Swiss. And this matchup got significantly worse for Jacob actually after the board.
Yes.
We saw Rest in Peace as a really strong weapon against the Rug Delver deck.
Huge.
And Brian's deck list does have 2 of those. We're probably going to see those come in. He does have access to Submerge, whereas Jacob can't play his Submerges. And on top of that, Brian will get more removal with an extra Swords to Plowshares.
Yep. And I have to say, post-board, it looks a lot better for Brian. I mean, I think Rest in Peace is a huge, major player.
Yeah, once a Rest in Peace resolves, it's very difficult for Jacob to win the game. As we saw before, in his full 75, he only has 1, we said, was it 1 or 0? Is 0 ways to answer a resolved? He has 0 ways to answer a resolved
Yeah,
Rest in Peace. He can't get it off the board once it's
He
down.
has to kill with 1/1 Nimble Mongoose, a Delver under, a barrage of spot removal spells, 1 Vendilion Click, or 1 Jace the Mind Sculptor.
Yeah, and we actually saw Jacob board in the Jace the Mind Sculptor against Joshua Ravitz.
Yeah, a card that you wouldn't think is necessarily all that great in this tempo-y, mana-oriented battle. But if the game is short, then Jacob's likely favored. If the game goes long, then Jace is good. So it's kind of a win-win type of card, and certainly one of the more powerful outs to a Rest in Peace.
All right, so interesting question here. Brian's going to have to go to 6 again. In this matchup, would you want to be on the play if it meant you could only ever keep 6 cards?
It's close, but I actually think so.
Yeah, and so despite that he's on 6 again, Brian's still probably a slight favorite
Yeah,
here.
the play is just way too important in the Stifle Days mirror.
All right, so Brian's going to start out with a turn 1 fetch for Tundra. And
I would say it's more important for Brian to be on the play just so that Jacob isn't.
Right.
Yeah.
He's going to play that into Delver of Secrets. That is his only land, though, in his hand, so there is some risk of him getting knocked out of the game.
That is scary times. Although Jacob is not likely to spend a turn. Ooh, I was gonna say not likely to spend a turn wastelanding.
Well, he might now. Now that
Yeah.
he's going to get to see Brian's hand, it's a Submerge, a Swords, a Spell Pierce, and a Force of Will.
Not actually that bad of a hand with, a threat already on board.
The danger is that if Jacob has something like Lightning Bolts here, that is incredible against this hand.
Absolutely.
This hand is really, I would say, it's a protect the Delver hand in its in its purest. And Jay is going to start out by taking away all of Brian's mana.
Look at that.
And the draw is Stoneforge Mystic.
It's
not a land and not a spell. That's terrible. So he will swing for 1.
All right, and Jacob now establishing his own mana base now that he's done messing with Brian's.
He actually has Pyroblast. He's going to use that during upkeep. If you're Brian, you just have to force it here. I can't.
Yeah.
Yep, force.
Yep, protect the queen. Protect the queen.
The Force of Will is gone. The Submerge is gone.
Daze the Force. The Delver is gone, and
now Brian
Jacob
has no permanence. Just
neither
nothing.
player has any permanence, but Jacob has a couple in his hand.
Yep. Draw for Brian was a Grim Lavamancer. Speaking of grim, this game is looking pretty grim right now.
Tick tock, instantly flips, just as a gold level pro would.
Well, of course. Why would you set up your Delvers when you can just be very pro? I mean, if you can be pro because you are a pro, and just flip them.
Exactly.
It's much more efficient to not have to set them up.
Oh, that is true. That's your pro tip for the day.
That was my pro tip, is that you don't set up your Delvers unless you absolutely have to,
and
because you should just flip them naturally.
Yeah, of course. Jacob Wilson, playing very quickly, knows that this game is absolutely in his grip. Brian Weller, still no permanence, no plays.
He's rushing to get to the flawless victory here.
Yes.
As you can see, he's at 6 cards in his graveyard. If he can sack 1 more fetch land or play 1 more ponder, Nimble Mongoose turns into a 3/3. He has Brian on a 3-turn clock.
Angry Bug, Angry Mongoose.
Yep, they'll put Brian down to 9.
With a bolt in hand, this actually represents lethal.
And this
represents
Nimble
lethal on
Mongoose,
board.
Yep, there we go. That's the 9th point of power. And we may see as you said, the flawless victory here.
Yep.
The completely empty board. Has the turn, and that is no land from Brian Weller Gordon. So there you have it. For the second time, we see Jacob Wilson is our Star City Games Legacy Open Championship champion, sweeping through the top 8 with 3-2-0 victories.
Yeah, the old 6-0. Don't need a courtesy game,
Yeah.
Why lose? Winning's so much better.
Yeah, so a strong performance there. Both times winning on the draw. He was against a mull to 6. Both times Brian presented a
fairly lackluster draws.
A lackluster draw that he'd have 1 threat, and Jacob was able to successfully first stop the threat that Brian presented, and then really dismantle Brian's deck after that point.
Yeah.
So we saw he made Brian fight over mana, and when Brian was down on cards, he wasn't able to do it.
Absolutely.